Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending. Appreciate it's been a long session here. We're going to mix up the format slightly. I'm going to bring James, as Nate rightly pointed out, onto the stage. I kind of described it to the stage management team before we arrived that it was going to be kind of a Batman and Robin sort of double act, and the stage management team quietly sort of corrected me on that and called us Laurel and Hardy. So I'm not quite sure which I identify with most, but we'll take either. I'm going to sort of bring James onto the stage in a second, but I'm just going to try and set the scene a little bit. We're going to talk about the hidden causes of wasted ad spend, just talk about the challenge more than anything, and then we're going to talk about the solution and how you guys can potentially look to tackle that. But I think that it's really important for us that actually comes from a customer of ours, and that this is not a sales pitch. I'm not here to sell to you. I'm more about wanting to sort of raise awareness of the problem, the scale, and why everyone in this room should essentially be paying much closer attention to it. So we'll kick off. I've got a quote here. Some of you may be familiar with a guy called John Wanamaker. Those that aren't, he was kind of a marketing pioneer from the 19th century, somewhere between kind of 1830, 1880. He's actually extremely famous for developing the price tag. So back in the 19th century, everything was done sort of on haggle culture, bartering for pricing, and so to avoid that negotiation on market stalls and things, the price tag was invented ultimately to try and improve profit margins and remove that sort of hefty level of negotiation. He's also extremely well regarded and renowned for this quote, which is, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half. I think that the reason that I wanted to bring this up on stage is because that quote, despite it actually coming from the 19th century, is as true today as what it was back then. Despite all of the innovation, AI, technological advancements, this statement remains extremely true. And so wasted ad spend can come in many different formats. The most obvious one is investing money in non-incremental users coming to your site. So existing customers that you're wasting ad dollars on because actually they were coming to site regardless, and so that money would have been better spent elsewhere, and therefore wasted ad spend. And that's obviously a topic that's been widely talked about in the industry for a long period of time. Another form of wasted ad spend is, some of the guys have come on stage today to talk about, proper, correct, best practice when it comes to campaign creation, audience selection, creative excellence, etc. And so that's another form of wasted ad spend. If we don't have our best practice in place, then, we are at risk of wasting money, ultimately. But finally, the sort of form of wasted ad spend that I want to talk about to you today is probably one that's maybe not as widely known, but one that's extremely important and prominent, particularly in sort of the current environment that we find ourselves in, particularly with digital ad spend increasing. And that's wasted ad spend in the form of bot traffic and invalid traffic due to bots, scrapers, data centers, etc. And so some of you might be saying, I appreciate that there may be some scrapers, there may be some bots, but actually what is the scale of the problem? Should I really care about it? So I'm sure some of you in this room will be familiar with an organization called Integral Ad Science. They're a brand safety viewability partner that we're in partnership with. Back in 2023, we published a study in partnership with Integral Ad Science to try and understand, we exist as a business to try and tackle this challenge, but we need to sort of educate, raise awareness to the market of how big the problem actually is. And so just to try and put it into context, so 2022, and the reason it's 2022 is that's the last full year of published kind of digital ad spend. There was $714 approximately billion spent on advertising globally. Of that, we've kind of just tipped the scale as an industry with over 50% going towards digital, with around a 17.5% CAGR. So 391 billion spent on digital. In terms of wasted, there's approximately 54 billion pounds every single year that's wasted due to bot traffic. And that was identified through a study that we published, which analyzed over sort of 3.5 billion clicks. What I'd encourage everyone to do, you can either take your phones out now or I can bring this back at the end, but we have a full report that you can sort of take a look at, which will give you granularity around the different platforms, channels, the platforms, placements so that you can get a broader understanding and go into detail. I'm also happy to answer any questions that you might have at the end. But the most important part of today is for James to come on and talk about his story with Funding Circle, how he was first identifying kind of wasted ad spend and the concept of it, bot traffic, how them as a business have gone on a journey to try and tackle it, the benefits that they've done, and then also let's talk about some recommendations that you guys can potentially benefit from. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome James up onto the stage, please.
Hi everyone, I'm James. I look after digital marketing at Funding Circle. Just for those who don't know Funding Circle, we're a B2B UK-based fintech, launched in 2010 in response to the global financial recession that was happening at the time. We've lent about £16 billion to the US, UK and European markets. And our main customer are small business owners, people who are looking to get that capital or working cash flow to help them grow. And one of the things that obviously we care a lot about is Google spend. Since COVID-19, if everyone remembers that, we've actually flipped our business. So a lot of the marketing before that was a lot of direct mail, a lot of letters in the post. But since that time, luckily for me in my career, digital has become a huge part of Funding Circle. So every dollar is kind of measured down to the final T. And so every time we can find some efficiencies, we're looking for them and to try and get better CPAs.
Thanks, James. I think that's really helpful. One thing that I think would be great to hear from you is, I've just kind of gone on about why wasted ad spend in the form of bot traffic is super important, but how did you find out about it, and what was kind of the sort of light bulb moment where you went, geez, this is actually a problem that we need to try and tackle?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think we're all aware of it, and we've spoken to our Google rep quite a lot about it, and we've actually had a few refunds from Google saying, okay, we messed up, here's some money back. It was actually one of your competitors who were advertising quite heavily on LinkedIn or Meta, I think it might have been. So like a good marketer, I went onto Reddit and tried to find out who was actually in this space and try and do a bit of market research of who was in there. I spoke to one of your sales guys actually, and he kind of took us through some of the numbers that you've done here. And we launched a free trial. We understood a bit about it. And one of the things I really recommend, I can kind of jump into the end of our recommendations, but one of the great things about what Lunio do is they offer all of the weblogs to download. So they offer you have a false positive rate of, I think it's like 0.05% of valid traffic that is incorrectly invalid, but they allow you to download your own weblogs and check them against your Gclids and see what would have actually converted. And it was near as damn it as that for us. So it made us kind of think, well, actually some of this traffic on some of our campaigns, we were seeing 15-20% traffic that was invalid. Allowed us to immediately just go, cool, yeah, solved.
Nice. And so you kind of talked on a couple of parts there, which is kind of, there was a bit of buzz in the industry. It's a topic that you thought it's worth exploring. Probably someone banged on the door enough for you to go, maybe I should pay a bit of attention to this. So what's your journey been to date? I know that you mentioned that we did a trial with you guys, but kind of more broadly, what's kind of your experience been with the challenge to date, and how have you kind of gone about tackling that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've, like everyone, marketing spend's coming under more scrutiny, I guess. And actually, a lot of the stuff that Carl was saying, I really resonated with around first-party data and moving to broad and ROAS and all that kind of stuff. And actually, in our mature products, we have managed to make a lot of efficiencies on our own without Lunio. But in our brand new products, so things like credit cards, which have really, really high competitive landscape and really high CPCs. We've kind of been thinking, how do we do this before we have the first party data to put behind that and give it a value for ROAS? So that's where Lunio has really come in and kind of been this kind of hygiene factor that sits behind all of our PPC, really, not just on Google, but on Meta now. And it allows us to kind of think, when we are about to launch a new product, okay, let's get Lunio spun up, let's see what's going to happen with this, especially if it's something silly like max impressions or max clicks, just to get it going. Lunio is right there to kind of protect us and stop some of that spend being wasted.
Yeah, nice. And so a lot of kind of what you talk about right now is a feature in kind of our product and the existing other products, which is around sort of automated protection and audience exclusion based on IP address. Kind of, Is there any other way that you kind of use the platform at the moment, or do you kind of have plans to potentially use it in a slightly different way as well?
Yeah, I mentioned this to you. You've actually told me quite a lot of the things that we aren't using in the platform. We definitely use it as a kind of set and forget kind of tool. I'd say like a real hygiene factor. If I was to move job, it'd be one of the first things I'd pick up the phone and say, let's get this on and see what it can do for the new firm. But yeah, I understand like Lunio's got some more stuff coming out, especially things like PMAX. We're just about to spin up PMAX protection on it. That's quite an interesting thing because, as Catherine was saying, actually for lead gen, PMAX is quite an interesting space. It's not kind of as easy as e-commerce. So being able to protect some of that spend as well and make sure that it's as efficient as possible is super interesting.
Yeah, I think you make a really interesting point around PMAX. I think you're 100% right, and you kind of were talking to me earlier around how actually PMAX can be suitable for lead generation, and it can sort of drive huge amounts of scale for, retail, travel, and also B2B. Obviously, I think one of the biggest challenges is as you kind of open up the sort of different variants of inventory, that's when sort of some of the quality can drop, and then you kind of have sales teams that are trying to qualify leads and they're getting frustrated because the quality is not quite where you need to be. And so I think that trying to take back some of the control, obviously we're talking about these black box solutions that are maybe taking a bit of control away from us as advertisers. And so what the position that we're trying to have here is trying to give back a little bit of control and sort of give you an ability to be able to optimize slightly. And so I think, automated protection in the space is really sort of one way in which, advertisers can begin to mitigate the bot traffic, invalid traffic risk. But I think also, there's a huge amount of insight that's not actually available inside of the platforms that you can also use to potentially, inform test and learn and optimization and other growth opportunities. And so for us, the opportunity is much broader. And I know that sort of we have plans in place to sort of try and scale that for you guys as well. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just thinking of, especially in our space where hero terms can cost like £30 a click, £40 a click sometimes. You're absolutely spot on. So yeah, I was just going to say that it really does make a huge difference in our space.
Sure. I'm not sure how we are on time. I don't want
7 minutes.
Oh, all right. We've got plenty of time. So I guess something else that would be really interesting to understand is kind of what would your recommendation be to kind of the guys in this room that have maybe either not heard of kind of the problem around invalid traffic or have heard of it before, but not really understood the scale of it, and kind of how would you advise that they go on the journey like what you did?
Yeah, I mean, I'd speak to you guys, so why not? Come and say hi to the Lunio guys on the stand. But more than that, actually, one of the things I'm being serious about the weblogs thing. So you can take their free trial and they'll give you this sales spiel and all that kind of stuff that you're meant to do. But because they're marking their own homework in their own platform, it says how much money they've saved you. You kind of think, is that real? Is that believable? But because you can download the weblogs, which I don't know if any of the other competitors do, well, at least not 18 months ago, 2 years ago, that really helps sell it internally, because you can kind of say, well, we can justify this cost because we know 20% of this campaign is invalid. So if we can block that, that's 20% more leads that we can pay for. So one of the other great things that we've started to do is that you don't just have to block immediately out of the gate. You can monitor new platforms as well. So things like Twitter or X, we don't actually advertise on there, but we do monitor on there. So if we want to understand what's actually going on there in terms of like click fraud, we can see, okay, is it actually worth it? Do we want to block it and all that kind of stuff? So it is, I'd at least take the trial, right, and see if you can save yourself cash.
I mean, I appreciate the call out, but transparently, like from my perspective, it's just more wanting to sort of acknowledge that there is a challenge. So from my side of things, it would just be to pay more attention to it, do a little bit of more due diligence about the problem that you could potentially have in the space. Are you wasting investment on something that could be being channeled into another area? And there are different ways that you could potentially do that. There are different vendors that you could potentially do that with. But I think it's just begin to acknowledge the challenge. I think that we're probably all in this world where we have been forced to some degree to take Google's word as gospel, and actually maybe we're now in a world where we probably need to try and challenge that a little bit. We need to try and verify it a little bit. And so I would just try to empower everyone in the room to go and do a bit more due diligence. Do you have a problem? And not every business does. It could be very different based on the vertical that you're operating in, the keyword set that you're currently optimizing towards, or, the catalog that you have from a PMAX perspective. Like, there are so many different variants that can impact the volume of invalid traffic that you might have. Seasonality is always a big factor as well. I noticed there's a lot of people from the retail sector. If you think about Q4 in general, obviously it's peak for retail. Well, that's when invalid traffic and bot traffic is likely to be at its highest. And so it might be relevant for you to just do a bit more due diligence and try to challenge maybe what's being told from a different perspective. And then in terms of how you want to tackle that, you can then make your own decision on, what is the right next step for you. But I would just say, like, the one bit of advice from me would just be pay closer attention, and just try and understand, is there a problem, is there not a problem, and build an action plan in and around that. James, I'm conscious that you've got some results to share as well in terms of what Lunio has been able to do for Funding Circle. So I'll just bring them up on screen maybe.
Yeah, so on the left-hand side, you can see this is our total Google paid generic account on the left-hand side. So it's nearly 17% of the traffic that was coming through was invalid. And by the time that we'd used Lunio for a while, this is down to like 3 or 4%. And this number here, around like 10% conversion impression to MQL, I think is probably a bit bullish in terms of like saying it's all Lunio, because it probably isn't. There's lots of good optimizations that we've been doing ourselves. And it's really hard to pick apart exactly how much we've been able to sort of give this back to Lunio. But even if it's a part of this, it is a huge amount of ad spend that goes into this. We spend, I won't say the exact number, we spend millions of pounds on Google a year. And this can be absolutely huge in terms of how many leads we can get through to the sales guys to actually get loans and help the UK economy. So yeah, it's massive. And actually what we've noticed with things like, as I said, with new products, we've launched a new credit card. This can be higher than 17%. This can be like 25% when we first launch, especially on things like, max clicks or something like that, just to get some data in. So having Lunio behind you to kind of say like, okay, let's protect some of this traffic is really helpful and helps justify the spend that you're actually putting into the platform.
Nice. Thanks for joining me on the stage, James. I'll just bring up the final slide. But as James kind of alluded to throughout, really didn't want this to sort of be a sales pitch as such. But if you guys are interested in learning a little bit more about the challenge, if you are interested in potentially having an audit of your activity, which is completely free of charge, is a 14-day audit to see if you have a problem or if you don't, then please do come and see us down on the stand on the ground floor in the exhibitors center. You can also scan the QR code on the right hand side where you can submit and someone will get in contact with you. But I would just encourage you, in whatever kind of capacity you do that in, is just to pay more attention to the challenge, because there is huge amounts of sort of effectiveness gains by just paying a lot of attention to this, alongside sort of some of the other recommendations that the other guys have said whilst being on stage. But yeah, thank you all for your time, and hopefully I can have a chat with you after down on the stand or wherever that might be. Thanks, guys.